Okay, I guess we're live. It's 6 o'clock, so welcome, Falcha. This is the inaugural live podcast of Random Thoughts from County Antrim. Now, that's the title of the program, and it's going to stay the title until I come up with something else. But my name is David McDonnell, and I am the host of this podcast. I'll be telling you some stories, some yarns, maybe a few legends, but and also some historical tidbits. But all of it will be quite random, because frankly, that's kind of how my brain works. It is indeed from County Antrim, because that's where I live, and that's where I am sheltered in place. Now, I don't live in County Antrim, Ireland, although that's where my ancestors came from. I live in County Antrim, Michigan. Many of you probably don't know that there's a County Antrim in both Ireland and Michigan. And I'm probably the only person in County Antrim, Michigan, who pronounces it that way. Most people here pronounce it Antrim County. Now, maybe in a future podcast, or maybe later today, or later this podcast, if I have time, I'll tell you where the name comes from and how Antrim County, Ireland got its name and how Antrim County, Michigan got its name. We'll see if we have time. I plan on doing this podcast the same time every week and limit it to a half hour or less. So I'll be done at about half past. I don't think you want to hear me ramble any longer than that. And we'll see how often we do this. I think I'm going to do it as long as we have a pandemic and are sheltered in place. Now, I didn't get really spruced up for the occasion. This is me normally. I did shave this morning. Since I've been sheltered in place, I have not shaved. I went 2 or 3, I don't know, maybe 4 months without shaving. And I had a beard. Wasn't a great-looking beard, but it was a beard. And I hadn't grown one of those in a long, long time. But I thought it was kind of scraggly looking, and I didn't think you really wanted to look at it. And I'm not one to do a lot of primping and grooming. So rather than trimming my beard, I just shaved it off. I also got a haircut, and the haircut was done by my wife. Barbershops are not yet essential services where you can go out to a hairstylist or a barber and get your hair cut. So if you got any complaints, you can give them to my wife. I used to have hair, but she just went too far, I think, when she started cutting, and then now I don't have any. I'm lacking hair on the top of my head. Because simply, hairstylists are not essential service. Now, this whole essential service thing, kind of a puzzlement to me, and some of them are obvious. Obviously, medical personnel. And anybody who works in a hospital is absolutely essential during a pandemic. And so are people who work in the whole food chain, so to speak. The people who grow food, raise food, process and package food and deliver it to the logistical services who deliver it to the grocery stores and the grocery store personnel. I don't know what the heck any of us would do. I don't know what I would do if it wasn't for those people. I'd probably go out and have to eat my neighbor or something, because if it wasn't for those kind folks. Or more likely, my neighbors would be eating me by now, because that's what happens when you're absent food. But some of the other essential services are somewhat puzzling, and I just give you a couple of examples. One is one of the states named as an essential service, tattoo parlors. Now, I do not have a tattoo. I've been seriously thinking of getting one, but I'm pretty sure I can wait until this pandemic is over. I don't need to rush out today during a pandemic and get me tattoo. I'll be patient. Now, there is another essential service here in Michigan, which might surprise some of you. Some of you will not be so surprised. But for some reason, for some reason, you'll know the reason when you hear the story, but for some reason, the services of a clockwinder has been deemed an essential service. Now, there is a clockwinder in County Antrim in Michigan by the name of Seamus O'Leary. And Seamus is quite prolific in his clockwinding. And many people say he is indeed the best clockwinder in all of County Antrim. Now, it was about, I think, December, January, is before the virus hit here, that my wife says to me, she says, David, I'm in need of a clockwinding. Please go fetch Seamus O'Leary and have him come over here and wind my clock. And after you've done so, you can go to the pub. And when you're at the pub, you can stay there for an hour or two. Now, I'm a man who enjoys my time at the pub. And I'm usually quite chastised for that proclivity. And my wife had never before encouraged me to go to the pub. So I was not about to pass up the opportunity, and I did as I was told. I went looking for Seamus O'Leary, and when I found him, I said, Seamus, my wife is in need of a clockwinding. And Seamus said to me, he said, I will go over to your house and I will wind her clock straight away. And then I went to the pub. Now, you must know, County Antrim is a fairly rural county. There isn't an Irish pub in the entire county, so I had to drive all the way to Traverse City to get to a good Irish pub. And I was there, I had a pint or two of Guinness. Actually, truth be told, I probably had 3 or 4 pints before I was done. And then I made the long drive back to me home. And when I got home, I discovered that my wife was happy. Now, I must tell you, that is not her ordinary demeanor. And I asked her, how did your day go? And she said, Seamus O'Leary came over to the house and he wound me clock quite nicely. Thank you very much. That was in December, January. Now, later January, maybe early February, again, before the virus had really hit this part of the North America, my wife says to me, I am in need of a clockwinding yet again. And she says, go to the pub. And stay there an hour or two if you like. And while you're at it, go ahead and bet on the ponies. And she reached into her purse and gave me some money and said, use this money for your wagers. Now, I'm a man who enjoys betting on the ponies. And I'm usually chastised for that proclivity, and my wife had never encouraged me to bet on the ponies, and certainly never given me money to do so. So I was not about to pass up the opportunity. I did as I was told. I drove back into Traverse City, went into my favorite pub. I had a pint or two of Guinness. I bet on the ponies. I probably should tell you this, or please don't tell anybody else this. But betting on the ponies at a pub in Michigan, anyway, is not legal. It might be someday, but presently it is not. But if you know the bartender, and you give him a nice tip, he will allow you to bet on the ponies right there. And there's usually a big screen TV, and they have the horse races on the television, and the bartender will collect your wager. And if you win, he'll pay out, open a cash register and pay you out your winnings. But again, that is not quite legal. But you can do it if you know the bartender well. And I was at the pub quite a while. And I was betting on the ponies. And I was doing pretty well. I won some money for a while anyway, until maybe the last race or two where I bet too much on a losing horse and I lost it all. And then I went home. Now, when I got home, I discovered yet again my wife was happy. And I had not seen her so happy since the last time Seamus O'Leary came over and wound her clock. Now, again, that was February, January, whatever. It was before the pandemic. And then early March, just before the pandemic had reached North America, but we had not yet gone into the lockdown. I think our governor ordered the lockdown, I think, mid-March. Our governor, by the way, just for those of you who are not from Michigan, she has a name. But she's more well known across the world as that woman from Michigan. And that's because that buffoon in Washington referred to her that way. So she is that woman in Michigan. And she ordered a lockdown in mid-March. I don't recall the day. It seems like ages ago. But before the order, my wife said to me, I am in need of a clockwinding yet again. Go fetch Seamus O'Leary. And of course I did as I was told. I wasn't going to pass up that opportunity. So I went and found Seamus O'Leary, and I said, Seamus, my wife is in need of a clockwinding. And he said, I'll come over to your house and wind her clock straight away. And I went to the pub. All the way in Traverse City, which is not around the corner, I must add. But when I got there, I discovered that even though we hadn't had the lockdown order yet, the virus was beginning to affect the supply chain. Things weren't working exactly as they used to. And I got to the pub and I discovered that the man who ordinarily delivers their Guinness every day did not make his delivery that day. And in fact wasn't scheduled to make it. They weren't even sure when he would come back to make a delivery because the whole supply chain had been disrupted by this virus. Now, who would go to a pub or stay at a pub which had no Guinness? So I went home. Then when I went home, I walked into the house, walked into my parlor, and there, right in my own parlor, is Seamus O'Leary winding my wife's clock. And I said, Seamus, what are you doing? I said, you must leave my house right this moment, which he did. And then I said to my wife, what are you doing? You're having Seamus O'Leary wind your clock while my clock sits on the shelf gathering dust. I said, the next time you need a clock winding, I'll do the winding myself. And I hope this is a lesson to all the husbands that are watching right now. Whether there's a pandemic or not, whether there's a shelter in place or not, every wife needs a good clock winding once in a while. And when she does, you best be doing the clock winding yourself. If you don't, Seamus O'Leary will. Remember that. Now, because clock winding is an essential service, I suspect Seamus O'Leary is still going door to door, still going to houses. People are calling him regularly and asking him to come over and do his trade, winding clocks. And I'm sure he's doing it. I'm sure he's quite prolific at it. Come to think of it, I'm not sure how he does it with proper social distancing. But if anybody knows or figures that out, let me know. And if I run into Seamus O'Leary, I'll ask him. And then I'll let you know how you wind a clock with proper social distancing. Well, we've talked about social distancing. We've talked about the coronavirus. I do want to talk to you a little bit about different cultural reactions to the coronavirus. Now, there's a piece floating around. I remembered it, and I took a look on the internet for it. And it's a piece supposedly written by John Cleese, Monty Python fame. And I'm 99% certain that John Cleese didn't write this piece. But it's usually attributed to him on the internet. And you know, you must believe what's on the internet. So I'm going to give it to John Cleese. Now, what the piece did is he talked about the different cultural reactions when there was a wave of terrorist attacks in Europe. And he talked about different European reactions, particularly the Scots and the English. So I'm going to update that story a little bit. I'm going to change it to the coronavirus, and I'm going to add the Irish and the Americans to the mix. Now, what John Cleese said is that when, or what this piece said, is when the coronavirus first hit Europe, the English were miffed. And when the numbers started to climb, they raised their level of concern to peeved. Now, when English began to die from the coronavirus, they raised their level of concern to irritated, and later to a bit cross. Now, you must know that the English have not been a bit cross since the Nazis bombed London. Now, as the death toll mounted, which it has, unfortunately, in England and elsewhere, the English raised their level of concern to tiresome. And finally, ultimately, today, they raised their level of concern to a bloody nuisance. And the English have not had a bloody nuisance as their level of concern since 1588. And that was when the Spanish Armada threatened the entire island. Now, the Scots, in contrast, were pissed off before the virus hit anywhere. Before it hit Wuhan, the Scots were pissed off. Now, when the coronavirus hit Scotland, the Scots raised their level of concern to, let's kill the bastards. And frankly, those are the only two emotions, only two levels of concern the Scots have. Pissed off, or let's kill the bastards. Now, the Irish, in further contrast, are a little bit more of a laid-back people. They're a little more of a no-worries people. And when you think of it, it makes some sense. Because there really are only two possibilities. You're either sick or you're well. Now, if you're well, there's really nothing to worry about. So why worry? Now, if you're sick, there's really only two possibilities. You either recover or you die. Now, if you recover, you have nothing to worry about. So why worry? Now, if you die, there's really only two possibilities. You either go to heaven or you go to hell. Now, if you go to heaven, there's nothing to worry about. So why worry? Now, if you go to hell, you'll be too busy visiting and hanging out with your friends and your relatives to have any time to worry at all. So why worry? And that is somewhat the Irish reaction to the coronavirus. And what about Americans? What's the American reaction to coronavirus? Now, Americans, oddly enough, the level of concern really hasn't changed since the coronavirus first hit North America until this day. It hasn't changed at all. Because all Americans kind of fall into one of two groups. And I don't know whether it's half and half, or there's more in one group or more in the other. But all Americans are in two groups. The reaction of one group is, what the fuck? The virus isn't going to hurt me. I'm not going to let the virus change the way I live and do what I do. I'm going to live my life the way I need to live my life, the way I've always lived my life. Now, that's one group of people. The reaction of the other group of people is when they first heard about the virus and the virus first hit America, their reaction was, what the fuck? And that's their reaction. Everybody has, you can summarize the reaction of every American by those three words. And the only difference between the one group and the other is their tone of voice when they use those three words. Now, I'm an Irish American. So my attitude is somewhere in there, in fact. I'm kind of a no-worries kind of guy. I'm not too worried about me and what's going to happen to me. What happens, happens. I look at those two alternatives all the way down the line, and I say, yeah, what happens, happens. I already told my family that if I die from the virus, I want them to screw in the lid of the coffin very loosely. And that way, whatever happens to me, wherever I go, I'll be able to get out quickly and have a head start on everybody else. But I am worried about this virus. Not so much about me, but about other people, particularly my family, but all people. And so I follow the rules. I wash my hands like I am nonstop, and I wear a mask when I go out. I spent 3 months without going outside at all. When I go to the store, which is very rarely, I get groceries or I get medications. I wash down everything that I bring in the house. I sterilize everything at kitchen counters all the time, and I make my car a safe zone by wiping everything down. And that's just the way I am, again, trying to keep my house as safe as I can and myself as safe as I can so I don't hurt anybody else. I just want to tell you about one more session of storytelling I had a week or two ago. I'm a member of a group called Storytellers of Ireland, and it's an Irish group of esteemed Irish storytellers. I'm a member. I don't know how I got to be a member. I feel like Groucho Marx, that I would never join a group that would allow me as a member. But I am a member, and I think I'm the only American member of this Irish storytelling organization. But we had a session by Zoom a week or two ago, and it was called the Bealtanie Gathering. And if you're not familiar with Bealtanie, it's a old Celtic celebration, and it celebrates the end of spring and the beginning of summer. And we had this a week or two ago, where we different people told stories, and we were on Zoom, and some fascinating stories, and it was a wonderful, wonderful time. And our host apologized that we had this gathering in mid-May when Bealtanie is usually celebrated around May 1st. The end of spring and the beginning of summer. And I was watching this thinking that the timing was perfect. It was, again, late May. And in Michigan, northern Michigan, it was just beginning to be summer. We had snow a few weeks ago. I mean, it wasn't a deep snow. It was just a dusting. But it was snow nevertheless. And it's only been the last week or so that it's been warm enough that you could call it summer. So I thought the timing was perfect. But the reason I wanted to tell you about that is just the whole notion of the art of storytelling. And it's an interactive art. It requires, I think, eye contact with the audience and drawing in the audience as much as you can and asking the audience questions and getting them to respond and making them part of the story and sometimes having them act out the story, which I always do when I tell children's stories, is have them act it out as I'm telling the story. And it's just a wonderful experience that way. I've had stories that I've told that I could tell in 5 minutes, that with a good audience, an audience that was engaged, the same story took a half hour. And it was because people were injecting their remarks and taking the story in different directions, and it took me a while to go through the directions we were going and then bring it back to the finale. But it is what makes storytelling so exciting for me, and I think for many in the audience. And I'm telling you that because I'm not terribly tech savvy. I think I'm amazed, if you're watching this, that I was able to get this live podcast. But I haven't yet got it to the point where I can see your comments. If you're making comments now, I can't see them. And so the next time I do this, hopefully I can. And when I do, I hope that you will have the that you will add your comments. Because I noticed the storytellers at the Storytellers of Ireland at the Bealtanie gathering, some of them were having the same difficulty. They were telling the stories, but they're telling them in a vacuum. You're talking to a camera. You're not talking to an audience. You're not telling to an audience. And it's just a different experience altogether. Now, I promised you this was going to be a half hour, no more, no less. Maybe a little less, but no more, certainly. So I thought I'd do a quick commercial. This program is brought to you by Brewing Owl Press, which is my publisher. They published ClanDonnell right behind me, and also by the Horse of Guinness. They've agreed, without much of an advance, I must add, but they've agreed to publish my third book, which is a work in process, which I'm trying to work on during this shelter-in-place time. There's no excuse for me not to finish with this shelter-in-place. But I also thought that because of the pandemic and so many of you are locked in, we'd reduce the price. So ClanDonnell is ordinarily $34.95. We reduced it for the duration of the pandemic to $29.95. And By the Horse of Guinness, which is ordinarily $25.95, we've reduced to $23.95. Now, if you're good at math, you can add up those two, and there's something, whatever. But we've agreed with Brewing Owl Press, our publisher, that if you buy them both, it's a package deal. You can have them for $50. And if you live in the U.S. of A., the what the fuck nation, Brewing Owl Press will pay for the shipping. We'll get it to you for free. Now, I was planning on telling you all about County Antrim, but I think we're running out of time, so I may add that to our next podcast, which will be a week from now. Check us out, though, at ClanDonnell.net, which is our website, and send me an email at ClanDonnell@gmail.com. Now, again, I told you I'm not real tech-savvy, but I tried to hit a button where this whole podcast would be recorded. If I hit the correct button, it will be recorded. And then I will post it on my YouTube channel. ClanDonnell has a YouTube channel. Who would have thunk it? So, I'm going to tell you all, once again, stay safe. Stay smart. And do the right thing. So goodbye for now. Shalom.